going to go ahead and get started, so I'll call the Subcommittee of Energy, Climate, and Grid Security to order. And we do have votes that have just been called, so we're going to get through some opening statements, and then we will recess and come back. I want to thank everyone for being here. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Subcommittee on Energy, Climate, Grid Security hearing entitled Green Building Policies, Jeopardizing the American Dream of Homeownership. Today, we're here to discuss a radical energy and building policy of the Biden administration. These policies are jeopardizing Americans' ability to own homes, increasing energy costs, and straining our electric grid and putting our national security at risk. For millions of Americans across the country, owning a home is part of the American dream. It's a means to financial security. Unfortunately, the Biden administration's radical agenda is putting this further and further out of reach for many Americans. Building codes are adopted by state and local jurisdictions based on a variety of factors, such as climate and economic conditions. The Biden administration has encouraged the adoption of these model codes that seek to restrict the use of gas and promote electrification, even if it's not cost-effective or affordable. The Inflation Reduction Act provided for $930 million in grants and funding for states that adopt the 2021 Model Energy Code. Many states have chosen not to adopt the most up-to-date codes due to the increase in housing cost. For example, in my home state of South Carolina, if they were to adopt the 2021 model code, the average cost of the new home would increase by up to $31,000 with an energy payback time of 44 to 50 years. This could price many Americans out. Almost 60,000 households that would have previously been able to afford an average home in my state would no longer be able to afford it. This is not exclusive to South Carolina. Families across the country are being priced out of new homes. Advocates of these codes argue home buyers will save money over time, but that really does not matter if people cannot even afford the home in the first place. The Biden administration is also encouraging Americans to pay more for less through the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home program. The DOE's own website acknowledges that people can't afford these zero energy homes and recommends that as a way to offset the cost of the expensive zero energy features, Americans should buy smaller homes with less expensive finishings and furnishings to accommodate the cost of the Biden administration policies. That's just asinine. Even worse, the administration is trying to incentivize these rush to green building policies by using our taxpayer dollars to sweeten the deal through a near $1 billion IRA grant slush fund. The Biden administration is telling hardworking Americans to pay more for less, to sacrifice quality and build a smaller home, and using taxpayers to foot the bill to enforce climate radicalism. They're saying the quiet part out loud. They want to use other people's money to pay for the policies associated with their radical climate agenda. The Biden administration's obsession with banning fossil fuels in buildings and houses is also contributing to this housing affordability crisis. Energy is the foundation of everything in American life. And when the cost of energy goes up, so does everything else. The Biden administration's anti-American energy policies are increasing the manufacturing and construction cost of residential homes and commercial properties. These costs are directly passed along to the consumer. Natural gas allows us to heat our homes, keep the lights on, and to get to our jobs. Despite the DOE's policies to force electrification, their own numbers show that homes with natural gas hookups are 3.4 times more affordable than electric. The fossil fuel phase-out goes further than residential homes. DOE recently issued a rule to eliminate the use of natural gas in all new and modified federal buildings starting in 2030. This includes military installations and housing, multifamily high-rise residential buildings, and low-rise residential buildings. In addition to compromising our military and national security, DOE's own data shows this rule actually will increase energy usage. At a time where home prices are at an all-time high and Americans are struggling to make ends meet, the Biden administration is making everyday life more expensive with its rush to green building policies. I look forward to exploring this topic more today, hearing from our members and their questions. I want to thank you for being here. I'll now recognize Ranking Member DeGette for 5 minutes.
I'll defer to the ranking member of the full committee.
Chair, I'll now recognize Chair Rogers for 5 minutes.
No, the ranking member.
Oh, you're going to full committee? Okay. Did not see Mr. Pallone there. Mr. Pallone, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, we're once again seeing how extreme House Republicans have become when it comes to our nation's energy policy. At every turn, they put polluters over people, including relentlessly attacking popular energy efficiency programs that save American families money on their energy bills and help us confront the worsening climate crisis. Energy efficiency used to be a bipartisan issue. It wasn't controversial because both Democrats and Republicans recognized that it was common sense and an all-around win for American families. Unfortunately, that's no longer the case. All Congress long, House Republicans have been looking to roll back energy efficiency standards, and the Republicans' extreme attack on energy efficiency programs continues today with a look at building codes. Building codes are saving American households thousands of dollars on their energy bills. The Department of Housing and Urban Development found that a typical household would save $15,000 from a house built to the current model code compared to one built to the 2009 code. For low-income families using a Federal Housing Administration loan, savings pay back the upfront expense in 1.5 years. And these codes ensure some basic standards for energy conservation for renters who cannot choose how their houses or apartments are built. Now, these standards are critical because buildings account for 40% of our total energy consumption. Building codes are a critical tool to not only save Americans money, but also dramatically reduce energy consumption and decrease dangerous climate pollution. Energy conservation codes are projected to save Americans $182 billion and avoid 840 million metric tons of carbon pollution by 2040. And these are real savings that we should all be proud of. But instead, we're going to hear nothing but fear-mongering and misinformation from committee Republicans. They're throwing around exaggerated numbers of upfront costs and payback periods that are simply not true. These codes help households save money. It's that simple. And Republicans also choose to ignore the fact that building codes are voluntary. There is no federal mandate for states to adopt a certain code for households. The codes are set by third-party organizations, and then states and local entities choose whether or not to adopt the codes. If Republicans were serious about energy costs and trying to help Americans save money, they would be investigating real scandals like big oil colluding with OPEC to increase prices at the pump. And committee Democrats open an investigation of this collusion today. They would also express concern that the International Code Council bowed to the gas industry and violated its own policies in the recent code development process. But instead, Republicans are going after things like dishwashers, refrigerators, and now building codes, all to drive up energy bills on American families and protect their friends in the oil and gas industry. Unfortunately, despite the majority's best efforts, the Biden administration is making real progress to reduce energy costs for middle-class Americans. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act both provided funding to states and local entities to help adopt these voluntary codes. And the administration recently finalized a Bush-era provision to phase out fossil fuel-generated energy consumption in new and remodeled federal buildings. So I'm eager to hear how building and energy conservation codes save money for Americans, as well as the other benefits they can provide, such as improving indoor air quality and reducing emissions. We should be figuring out how to further assist states and local entities that want to adopt these codes instead of attacking the codes and falsely claiming that they are somehow mandatory when they're not. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Jim yields back. I now go to the chair of the full committee, Ms. Rogers, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our witnesses. Appreciate you being here to testify. We look forward to hearing from you. This committee plays a critical role in ensuring America continues to lead the world in innovation, entrepreneurship, reducing emissions, and improving people's lives. President Biden's a radical rush to green building policy will destroy this legacy and make it more difficult for people to realize the American dream. Under the Republican majority, this Congress, the Energy and Commerce Committee has led the way to shine the light on how the Biden administration's agenda is wreaking havoc on our economy, our energy security, and our national security. And what we see is this war on American energy is pervading every aspect of our lives. Inflation, energy prices, grocery bills have all reached a historic level. People are struggling to afford basic necessities like gas, groceries, and prescription medications. And in spite of this, the administration and some Democrat-led states are making life even more unaffordable by doubling down on expensive mandates for solar panels, electric cars, electric appliances. It appears they want to control every aspect of our lives and force us to do more with less. It doesn't have to be this way. The cost of buying a home in particular has reached an all-time high with a record average price of over $380,000. And aggressive green building regulations have been a major contributing factor in these price increases. Today, we're going to explore how the Democrats' rush to green agenda is increasing the cost of home ownership. We're going to hear from people with firsthand experience making construction materials, building homes, and delivering utility services in order to better understand how green building policies are impacting home ownership. We're going to uncover how the process to establish state and local regulations for building energy codes has been hijacked by radical environmental activists at the expense of the American people. This is an opportunity for members to judge for themselves whether the administration's bans on fossil fuels and natural gas are good for the economy and energy security, or whether Americans should be required to have things like rooftop solar panels, electric vehicle charging stations, and all-electric appliances if they make sense, and whether forcing people to pay more for less is a practical solution to deal with high energy bills and unstable electric grid. Policies like natural gas bans and electrification mandates are becoming increasingly widespread, especially in the more coastal blue states. At least 70 local governments in California, as well as dozens more in 7 states and Washington, D.C., have enacted some type of gas ban. New York has a statewide gas ban. Just recently, the Biden administration finalized new regulations to enforce a fossil fuel ban on all federal buildings, including military installations and residential housing. The Biden administration also finalized new green building regulations for federally backed mortgages, which will substantially limit the availability of affordable housing. It's a government-wide effort to go after homes and buildings. Dozens of agencies are drafting rules and regulations on buildings and homes to force this so-called green transition. These policies are impacting everyday Americans the hardest. For decades, America has been able to strike a healthy balance between affordable energy, a strong economy, while also continuing to be the leader in emissions reduction. And it is vital for Americans and their quality of life that we continue building on this legacy and striking that balance. So I look forward to working with Chairman Duncan and the members of this subcommittee to keep the Biden administration and states and local government accountable to the American people. With that, I look forward to the hearing, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the ranking member to get for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman, and I'll submit my full opening statement for the record. I know we have votes on the floor that we need to get to. I just want to point out that much of what we're talking about today does not even involve federal issues, because building codes, for the most part, are local governments. There's no national or federal building code, because under the U.S. Constitution, the regulation of construction is a state right, with some localities going even further. But however, DOE and other agencies, they don't mandate building codes, but they have developed voluntary building codes, which can address many of our important concerns, including public health, safety, and environmental protection. They're developed by a democratic and deliberative process, and so they also address cost efficiency and investment value. But again, the people who are developing and promulgating these codes are state and local governments, not the federal government. Why have building codes? Well, because they affect us every day. Some building codes, like fire safety codes and structural and seismic standards, affect us in obvious ways. Others, like lighting, quality, acoustics, and the air we breathe, are less noticeable, but they still have major impacts on our health and productivities. We spend about 90% of our lives in buildings, including to the EPA, which is why we're concerned about the impact of building codes on public health. And so these model codes can really help us build it right at the beginning, but frankly, they only work if they're used and enforced by state and local governments. So that's what's happening here. Now, many buildings that have been built previously, they waste a lot of energy because one of the concerns in building buildings was not energy efficiency as a priority. We don't have to have that as a case now, as we're understanding how important energy efficiency is. Buildings in the United States account for about 70% of electricity use, about 40% of the total U.S. primary energy consumption, and about 30% of operational GHG emissions. All of that consumption and waste, they unnecessarily cost homeowners and building owners billions of dollars a year, which is kind of ironic and inexcusable in times of budgetary and economic stress. Buildings that are constructed to the new codes will close a significant portion of the gap between how energy efficient the average building is. So it's sort of a win-win because you get more efficiency, that causes lower energy costs, it means fewer emissions, better to help us get to our climate goals, and it's cheaper for the building owners and the homeowners. What's not to like about that? But apparently, my friends on the other side of the aisle don't like it because they don't want to have any regulations. My consumers, the people who live in the 1st Congressional District of Colorado, they would like to pay as little money as they can for energy every month. And that's why having good and equitable building codes will really help. With that, as I said, I'll put my full statement in the record and I yield back.
Generally yields back. We're had hoped to get all the witness statements before, but looking at the vote tally, we're going to recess now for fuller votes and return 10 minutes. I'll gavel in 10 minutes after the last vote is called, not the last vote is closed. The last vote is called. Subcommittee is now stand in recess. All right, we're going to go ahead and call the subcommittee back to order. Thanks to the witnesses for bearing with us with the vote. We don't have control over that, but we do have control over the subcommittee. So thank you all for being here and taking time to testify. Each witness will have the opportunity to give an opening statement followed by a round of questions from the members. And today our witnesses are Mr. Phillip Bonnell. Is that Bonnell or Bonnell? Okay. President of PABCO Building Products, Mr. Shawn Woods, President of Ashlar Homes, Mr. Rob Howard, President of Howard Building Science, and Mike Casper, President and CEO of Joe Carroll Energy Co-op. You're going to be given 5 minutes. There's a series of lights in front of you that go from green to yellow to red. Gets to yellow, it's about time to start wrapping up. Gets to red, try to find a way to end it. And so, Mr. Bonnell, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Congressman, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak here today. By introduction, my name is Phil Bonnell, and I am president of PABCO Building Products. We are a family-owned business headquartered in Sacramento, California. PABCO, it manufactures and sells building products for the residential marketplaces. We sell in 11 Western states and in Western Canada. Our core products are gypsum drywall and asphalt roof shingles. In addition to that, we also make paper, 100% recycle, I might add, paper for our gypsum wallboard surfacing. We make that in Vernon, California. Our plant locations are Las Vegas, Nevada, I just mentioned Vernon, Newark, California, and Tacoma, Washington. Collectively, PABCO employs about 550 people, and we have net sales of about $400 million on an annualized basis. While that may sound large, we are the smallest producers in the United States of these products. Again, as a family-owned business, we're very regional, and we service mostly the Northwest and Southwest coastal markets in the U.S. I'm here today to offer some points of interest and discussion for our experience in what has happened with energy availability over the last 5 years. We've had some very unique occurrences in our marketplaces and things that still persist today that have caused energy prices to elevate dramatically. We will also be talking a little bit about proposals on banning natural gas in residential applications, and in my opinion, banning natural gas in any environment is yet another move to limit diversity of energy sources. And as you'll see from my testimony going forward, that's very important. Over the last 5 years, we've seen energy cost inputs increase dramatically in our businesses. We are constantly looking for ways to reduce our energy consumption. It's in our best interest to do so. Energy input represents a very significant cost factor of the product offering that we have. Over the last 10 years plus in the Western United States, green energy policy has seen the closure of, I believe, more than 5 coal-powered fire plants. So over 5,000 megawatts has been retired. The net impact of that is that we are now relying on natural gas to generate electricity. And for us, we've seen the use of natural gas in our marketplaces go from about a 19% usage for electrical generation up to 46% for electrical generation. When one of the other big entries into this marketplace has been renewables, but they have a problematic flaw. And that flaw is when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, they don't generate electricity currently. Putting this in perspective, over the last 5 years with the fluctuation in energy prices, we have seen energy pricing from as low as $1.03 an MMBTU up to $54 an MMBTU. The net differential on this reflects, if we look at our 2020 energy costs for one specific plant, I was paying about $11.5 million on an annualized basis. In 2023, that number was almost $30 million for energy inputs. So costs are increasing dramatically. We look to reduce those energy costs wherever possible through our products and materials. We also hedge our energy costs by buying future energy strips, and we also curtail production operations when energy costs are too high. This situation has occurred 3 times in the last 4 years for us, where we've had to either curtail energy or rely on our future strip purchases. Buying futures helps us hedge it, but ultimately it raises the cost because you buy at a higher rate than you would, say, on a daily spot if the market is low. So bottom line, energy costs have grown significantly, a huge impact for us on our building materials. It has caused cost increases approaching 30% in the last 4 years. In terms of residential markets and talks about banning natural gas, it's my belief that reducing the diversity of energy sources is only going to create more issues going forward. It puts more strain on an electrical grid that is already taxed, and will cause ultimately more problems and more costs for those people trying to own homes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll now go to Mr. Woods for 5 minutes.
Chairman Duncan, Ranking Member DeGette, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the National Association of Home Builders. My name is Shawn Woods, and I'm a home builder from Blue Springs, Missouri. I strive to build homes that families in my community can afford, serving households in the entry-level housing market. NHB represents over 140,000 members involved in residential and light construction, building about 80% of all new housing in the United States annually. The primary and persistent challenge of the housing market is a lack of attainable, affordable housing. Currently, 77% of households are unable to afford the median price of a new home, and half of all renters are cost-burdened, spending over 30% of their income on housing. We must do better to ensure that all Americans, including workforce families like members of the armed forces, teachers, and first responders, have access to affordable housing where they serve and live. Recent federal pushes for stringent energy codes, like the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code, are raising construction costs significantly. Compliance with these codes can add as much as $31,000 to the cost of a single-family home. Furthermore, adhering to the zero energy provisions can add an additional $82,000 per home. These increased costs make home less attainable, forcing many potential buyers to stay in older, less efficient homes, which undermines the goals of these energy policies. The Inflation Reduction Act allocated $1 billion for state and local governments to adopt strict energy codes, but these mandates worsen the housing affordability crisis. Unfortunately, this energy code program has had damaging effects on the housing market in my own community. Shortly after the passage of the IRA, Kansas City, Missouri, adopted the 2021 IECC without amendments in hope of receiving these grant funds. This move has regrettably paralyzed the housing market in Kansas City at a time when area housing markets are booming. The Kansas City metro area, excluding Kansas City, has seen a 117% rise in single-family construction permits in January and February of 2024 compared to last year. Conversely, Kansas City has seen a 22% decrease in permits from the same time frame. The decline in home building has had a domino effect on the rest of the economy, with fewer jobs, fewer housing options, higher housing costs, and a lower tax base. Unfortunately, the federal push to use costly energy codes doesn't stop there. HUD and USDA will soon start requiring 2021 IECC for all HUD and USDA financed new construction. This mandate raises housing costs, particularly in the entry level, limiting access to mortgage financing and hurting vulnerable buyers and renters. HUD and USDA should assist vulnerable home buyers and renters, not price them out of the market. This policy will deter new construction at a time when increasing the housing supply is crucial to lowering shelter inflation costs. Most concerningly, the Federal Housing Finance Agency is considering applying similar standards to those adopted by HUD and USDA homes financed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which provides 72% of financing for new home purchases. This would set a de facto national energy code, severely disrupting new home construction, compounding the housing supply shortage, and negatively impacting housing affordability. Beyond energy codes, efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by banning natural gas and propane in new constructions are concerning. New homes are already more energy efficient than older ones, and these mandates are costly and impractical. Electrification increases upfront costs potentially by $3,000 to $15,000 per home, pricing thousands of families out of the market. The performance limitations of electric heat pumps in colder climates make fossil fuels a necessary option. Additionally, costs for upgrading electrical service and community infrastructure are substantial and often not included in initial estimates. Furthermore, restrictions on gas appliances will provide negligible health and energy benefits and ignore consumer preferences and financial realities. Over 187 million Americans use natural gas appliances, saving an average of $1,068 annually. Gas stoves are used in nearly 40 million homes nationwide and have proven to be a safe, efficient, affordable appliance choice for families for well over a century. I think we all agree that the key housing issue facing the nation is the affordability crisis. The only way to improve housing affordability is to increase the housing supply. When the government seeks to mandate ill-conceived and costly green building mandates, this has the opposite effect. Thank you again for this opportunity. We look forward to working with you.
I thank the gentleman, and I'll go to Mr. Howard for 5 minutes.
Chairman Duncan, Ranking Member DeGette, thank you for allowing me to testify this afternoon. My name is Rob Howard. I'm the president of Howard Building Science, a home building company in Granite Falls, North Carolina, and a building science lecturer at Appalachian State University. I earned my general contractor's license in 2004, so I've been building sustainable, affordable housing for 20 years. I serve on the board of directors for the Watauga Community Housing Trust, and I was recently appointed to the residential builder seat on the North Carolina Building Code Council. My construction career started at Habitat for Humanity of Catawba Valley in 2001. That same year, Advanced Energy started their System Vision program to help affordable housing providers build energy-efficient homes that include a 2-year comfort and energy use guarantee. I like to say that I've never built a home to code. That might sound strange coming from a general contractor. But I've always looked at the building code as the baseline and not the finish line. One of my mentors, Arnie Katz, used to say that a home built to code is the worst home you can build by law. I believe that we can do better than that. We should build homes that are not just affordable to buy, but also affordable to own and operate. I've heard some complain that building to code makes houses less affordable. My experience has been just the opposite. Yes, there is an upfront cost, and I've found that it is generally in the range of what the Department of Energy, HUD, and the national labs have estimated, somewhere around $6,000 to $7,000 per home. But when you amortize that over a 30-year mortgage, as anyone concerned about affordability would be doing, you're talking about maybe $50 a month in additional monthly payment. And I've found, again, just as the Department of Energy and HUD have estimated, that the monthly energy bill savings are larger than that. So the homeowner is spending less on net each month and gets a better, more efficient, more comfortable house that's also more durable. And over time, they're saving thousands of dollars. You could compare it to buying a cell phone plan. You may find some carriers have very low upfront costs for the phone, but if the monthly payments are 2 to 3 times the size of other plans, then that catches up to you quickly, and you're ultimately spending much more. Unfortunately, in the housing market, it's just not as easy to know what your energy bills will be up front as it is to know a fixed cell phone payment, particularly with new houses, where you can't look at what the energy bills have been historically. I think if it were, buyers would demand homes be built at least to code. And I agree with my colleague here that the appraisal process should do a better job of taking into account and valuing the energy efficiency of a home. That would be a critical market signal. I'm currently building a pocket neighborhood of 11 small homes on 1.25 acres in downtown Granite Falls, North Carolina, sometimes referred to as a cottage court. Duke Street Cottages as an example of missing middle housing that provides a greater diversity of housing choice in a community where most new construction are large custom homes on large lots that are out of reach for most people. These are starter homes that are ideal for first-time home buyers, but they're also perfect for retirees who want to downsize into single-level living. My most recent customers are both first-time home buyers. One of them is a nurse at the local hospital in her 20s, and the other is a retired school teacher in her 70s. These are above-code all-electric homes with high-efficiency inverter heat pumps for space conditioning, heat pump water heaters, ventless heat pump dryers, and induction ranges. They also have mechanical ventilation systems to ensure healthy indoor air quality. With no wood or burning gas appliances, we have no concerns about carbon monoxide or other byproducts of combustion. These are DOE Zero Energy Ready homes that are roughed in for future solar panels and EV charging. The 45L tax credit for builders of energy-efficient homes offers a $5,000 incentive for building to the DOE Zero Energy Ready home standards, which are based on the 2021 IECC. In my experience, the $5,000 tax credit comes very close to offsetting the additional cost of insulation, air sealing, high-efficiency HVAC and water heating equipment, and mechanical ventilation systems. Of course, these upgrades will eventually pay for themselves with energy savings. My wife and I kept one of the homes at Duke Street Cottages for ourselves. Our daughter just finished her sophomore year of college, and our son is graduating from high school tomorrow. We downsized from almost 4,000 square feet to 1,400 square feet, and our utility bills went from almost $400 a month to under $100 a month. Our new home is obviously smaller, but it's also more comfortable, quiet, low maintenance, and extremely efficient. In summary, I believe that a new home should not only be affordable to buy, but also affordable to own and operate. While certification programs help chart a path to move our industry forward, building and energy codes can have a much broader impact on all new home construction, including health, safety, durability, comfort, and energy savings. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today.
I thank the gentleman, and I'll go to Mr. Casper for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Duncan, Ranking Member DeGette, and members of the subcommittee. I'm President and CEO of JCE Co-op. We're headquartered in Elizabeth, Illinois, about 2.5 hours west of Chicago. I'm also the proud member of the American Public Gas Association's Board of Directors. JCE Co-op is a not-for-profit, member-owned and controlled distribution cooperative. We serve about 26,500 electric, natural gas accounts in 4 counties of rural Northwest Illinois. Our focus is providing members with safe and reliable electric, natural gas, as well as high-performance internet service at the lowest practical price. JCE Co-op is also a member of the American Public Gas Association, which represents roughly 1,000 communities across the U.S. that own and operate the retail gas distribution entities. I would like to thank the subcommittee for holding this hearing today on policies that, if implemented, will negatively impact our members. While we serve residents of Northwest Illinois, these policies have the potential to negatively impact all community-owned gas utility customers, including those who might live in your districts. It is no secret that there are concerted efforts at all levels of the government to use energy policy to pick winners and losers. States and localities are adopting misguided building code and standard provisions that effectively limit a consumer's ability to choose a gas appliance. At the federal level, the Department of Energy is proposing appliance efficiency standards that take away consumer choice, forcing them to choose electric appliances. More recently, the current administration finalized a rule utilizing Section 433 of the Energy Security and Independence Act, which would significantly restrict the future on-site use of natural gas in federal buildings. In addition to Americans losing the ability to choose the energy source that best fits their needs, not allowing the direct use of natural gas to be part of Americans' energy mix will force consumers to pay more for their energy. The path to our country's affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy future requires continued utilization of community-owned gas infrastructure and its workforce. DOE's final rule significantly restricts many federal buildings' future use of on-site energy from affordable and resilient natural gas. According to the DOE's own data, natural gas is 3 times more affordable than electricity. I think of the natural gas used in the federal prison that we serve in Thompson, Illinois. As with all government facilities, its appliances will require retrofits at some point. I'm concerned about the hefty price tag of the requirements to retrofit the entire campus to accommodate electric appliances. And since JCE Co-op provides both gas and electric, I am equally concerned about how an already strapped electric grid will reliably adapt, if these policies are enacted, that is. Allowing the continued direct use of natural gas will not add further strain on the electric grid. Instead, the direct use of natural gas in buildings efficiently and affordably meets energy demand and provides fuel diversity, and I want to emphasize diversity and reliability to these important federal facilities. I also think of Robins Air Force Base in Houston County, Georgia, and military installations in San Antonio, Texas, all of which receive natural gas from community-owned utilities. How will military readiness and even national security be impacted if these bases are now required to just use electricity? Another concerning policy that I want to highlight is DOE's final rule on consumer furnaces. Many Americans rely on natural gas furnaces to heat their homes and businesses in the winter, especially in Northwest Illinois. The final rule establishes 95% efficiency standards for furnaces, which can only be met by condensing furnaces, effectively banning non-condensing furnaces that have been in millions of Americans' homes for generations or more. If a homeowner wants to install a condensing furnace, they may find that due to structural issues or code restrictions, they are unable to accommodate a condensing furnace's additional venting and drainage requirements. Others may simply be unable to afford the additional cost. I can talk about that later. Americans deserve with the right to choose the appliances they want, especially when the Energy Information Administration forecasts natural gas prices to remain low. I do want to express gratitude from all APGA members. I do want to express gratitude from all APGA members for the numerous bills that this subcommittee has progressed that would walk back these harmful appliance efficiency standards. Thank you for the opportunity to testify and for supporting policies that allow continued access to the affordable energy consumers want.
I want to thank all the witnesses for your testimony. We'll now move into the question and answer portion of the hearing. I'll begin with asking questions for 5 minutes. I disagree with the whole of government approach of the Biden administration, this mandate green building policies over objections of some states and local governments. After President Biden signed an executive order directing all federal agencies to develop climate building policies, we've seen an avalanche of new rules mandating expensive building codes and eliminating energy choices for Americans. Here are a few examples. DOE announced a $1 billion grant program to coerce states to adopt unproven net zero building energy codes, even if it raises home prices. HUD announced new federal home efficiency mandates for FHA and USDA-backed mortgages, even when they are not required by state building codes. DOE banned the use of fossil fuels in federal buildings starting in 2030, even for military installations and family housing. EPA is planning to eliminate natural gas appliances from Energy Star program and begin certifying homes and apartments to measure greenhouse gas emissions, and the Biden administration is actively encouraging states and local governments to adopt stretch codes to ban natural gas and mandate the use of solar panels, EV charging, and electric appliances. President Biden's green building policies are driving up home prices and pushing home ownership further and further out of the reach for millions of Americans. So, Mr. Casper, the whole of government rush to green agenda includes rules and regulations that restrict the use of natural gas. Will policies that force Americans to switch from gas to electric increase the cost of living?
From my experience, yes, for our member consumers. And so I'll just give an example of a lower income home complex in our service territory that we provide natural gas as well as electric too. The particular landlord decided, we worked with him, and they decided based on our evaluation analysis that natural gas was the cheapest form, not only from upfront costs, but also for utility costs for the future of those particular residents that would be living in that complex.
Thank you for that. As I mentioned, the DOE recently issued a final rule to eliminate the use of fossil fuels in all new and modified federal buildings starting in 2030. Your testimony mentions this rule can impact everything from federal prisons to military bases. From your perspective, does this federal rule undermine our national security?
That's a good question. I'm not an expert in our security, military security, but I believe it could, especially speaking from our other members who serve these bases, whether that's in Georgia or in Texas and across America. The concern that I have more than anything is that you cannot rely on one fuel source alone. It is important to be able to have a diverse fuel, not only from an electric generation standpoint, but think about it from a perspective of utilizing natural gas for power generation. As we begin providing or the more and more electricity is being utilized by beneficial electrification, let's call it, for facilities. You're going to be utilizing more natural gas for power generation to fill those gaps that renewables can't.
Thank you for that. We visited Misawa Air Base up in northern Japan, June of last year. And they do have some solar panels up there. They've also got natural gas, and I can imagine as cold as it gets, we saw the snow plows they use to clear the runways and the military base there. I can imagine how cold it gets, ski area, of just trying to heat your home with electricity in that kind of environment. And the costs that may be associated with it. Mr. Woods, although states and local governments have the authority to adopt and amend national model building codes, do you agree that there is an effort by this administration to push the adoption of these aggressive codes?
Yes, I do. I mean, like I spoke about, my municipality, Kansas City, Missouri, they had turned down the 21 Energy Code. They weren't going to adopt it until the IRA came out and it gave them grant money. They came back and the whole discussion was a financial discussion amongst the city council members to adopt the code in hopes of gaining grant money from the IRA.
Thank you for that. Last questions for Mr. Howard. These are the houses that you're building, correct?
Yes.
One's at 800 square foot, 1,400 square foot. What's the price per square foot for those?
The sales price, is that what you're
Sale
asking?
price, yeah. Price per square foot.
They're in the $200 to $250 a square foot range.
Okay, thank you for that. We see a lot of these in South Carolina, mainly on and around college campuses as rentals for the college kids, not for single-family residences. So it's intriguing, but I'm out of time, so I'm going to yield to the ranking member to get for 5 minutes.
Okay, well, following up on what the chairman said, the houses that you build, Mr. Howard, you said that you're building those houses for a variety of people because they're affordable. Is that right?
That is correct.
You're not just building them for college students, you're building them for retired people and for young professionals and others.
Certainly, yeah. Our target market is really both ends of the spectrum, first-time home buyers that are typically in their 20s and 30s, as well as retirees who want to downsize into single-level living.
And are those and also you?
That's right. I'm not quite ready to retire yet.
Okay,
but
no,
yeah.
but I mean, were the homes that the chairman was showing you, were those your homes?
Actually, the two-story is mine, yes.
Okay, so we had heard claims that the codes that the administration is pursuing would add $22,000 to $31,000 to the price of a new house. That's several times more than HUD found, or the Energy Department, or the most recent study conducted by Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. Is that true from your experience?
Not in my experience, no. As I mentioned in my testimony, I'm seeing cost increases somewhere in the neighborhood of $6,000 to $7,000, which aligns with the numbers that we're seeing from the national labs.
And that's a cost for the home that is built. Is it to these new codes, or is it higher than these new codes, as you testified?
So again, I'm building to the DOE Zero Energy Ready Home Standard,
Okay.
which is based on the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code.
Okay, and so what, and then you were saying, though, that that cost can be offset. Is that right?
Certainly. So the 45L tax credit can directly offset some of that cost, but you're also seeing significant cost savings over the lifetime that you live in that home.
Well, that's correct. Let's say you have a 30-year mortgage. Let's say it's $6,000 to $7,000 over 30 years. But then are you accounting for the reduced energy bills?
Yeah, certainly. I think just based on a simple payback calculation, you're probably talking about a 6 to 7 year payback that we're seeing. And, again, this is just my experience in a small town in western North Carolina.
Well, your experience is what counts. Now, are your homes popular?
I like to think so.
I mean, do you have trouble selling your homes?
No, we've not. So we typically have these homes sold before they're complete.
And what do the people tell you about why they want to purchase the homes?
I think most of my buyers are interested because of the price point. And of course, location is always a factor in a real estate transaction. But yeah, ultimately, I think they probably aren't able to appreciate the other benefits until they've actually lived in the home for some time. So we have a property owners association and we have monthly meetings. So I certainly have plenty of opportunity to hear direct feedback from my buyers. And I think the things that surprise them the most, or they're pleasantly surprised by how easy it is to heat and cool these homes, how comfortable they are. They've also commented on how quiet the homes are. So a home that is better insulated and better air sealed also ends up being just a quieter place to live.
Okay, thank you. Now, I just want to set the record straight with something. Some of my colleagues have been talking about federal buildings and and the quote green projects. I just want to point out that under the 2007 Energy Independence and Security Act, which was signed into law by President George W. Bush, that requires the DOE to develop and finalize a regulation that phases out fossil fuel consumption in federal buildings. The recently finalized Clean Energy for New Federal Buildings and Major Renovations of Federal Buildings rule completes the statutory requirement that was placed on the DOE under the George W. Bush administration. The total net benefit to the public, according to DOE's estimates, will reach up to $134 million, and it's expected to reduce carbon emissions by 2 million metric tons and methane emissions by 16,000 tons, which is equivalent to cutting pollution from 310,000 homes in 1 year. So I guess my point of saying this is I really feel like Congress and local and state governments and home builders and others could work together to try to find affordable, energy-efficient buildings that could actually be economically viable and positive. And that's what I think we should be talking about. I yield back.
Generally yields back. Thank God for the fracking revolution that found and harvested more natural gas after 2007. I'll now recognize the committee chair of the full committee, Ms. Rogers, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bonnell, thank you for your testimony. And as a family-owned manufacturing business based in California and operating in several Western states, you're certainly on the front lines of this war on American energy. The governors of California and my home state, Washington, want to close your manufacturing facilities and put you out of business by banning natural gas. My questions, can you make sheetrock, asphalt, shingles, or paper products without natural gas?
Congresswoman, I would ask you respectfully not to use sheetrock. That's a brand name from a competitor. But in a direct answer to your question, it is possible to make drywall with electrical dryers. It is not commercially feasible at this point. We would look at options for that if they were. We constantly look at new equipment and are always looking for capital investments to lower our energy costs. But the simple fact of the matter is it's a higher cost equation.
What about asphalt shingles?
Same story.
Paper products?
Even more so with paper products. Paper products would be very difficult. They're highly energy intensive, both gas and electric.
So would you speak to where do you see these products coming from in the future? Is it going to be possible to manufacture these kind of products in America, or are they going to be coming from other countries, like China?
Well, we've seen these products manufactured in other countries before, and quite frankly, it was a horrible experience here in the United States. Most notably, I think Chinese drywall in Florida caused very significant problems and issues, resulting in millions and millions of dollars of rebuild work that had to be done. I think the American consumer is not necessarily interested in buying a Chinese product to put in their home right now. But foreseeably, without the ability to use natural gas, we will lead to more offshore production.
Yep. Chinese building materials, Chinese electric vehicles. Another question, what happens to the price of construction materials if you have a statewide natural gas ban?
I can't even speculate. Right now, I'm looking, I guess the best way to respond to that is to look at what happened to us in January of 2023, when we saw $54 per MMBTU gas prices. We would literally see probably a doubling to quadrupling of pricing on drywall products.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Woods, as you know, climate activists and environmental groups have a lot of influence with the International Code Council and other standards-setting groups that develop the model energy codes. These codes increase construction costs with the promise of long-term energy savings. Would you speak to how they're working in practice?
You're asking me to speak to how the energy savings are working in practice?
Yes.
So, I mean, we just adopted the 21 Energy Code in Kansas City, Missouri, so I haven't seen it yet in practice in our area. But I do know the estimates that are coming out for what they're saying, the costs are grossly underestimated because they're not taking into account how we have to build the house differently to account for the codes themselves. Like one of those things would be R60 insulation. In Kansas City, we stick frame our roofs. We don't use trusses. You can't fit R60 insulation on a stick frame roof the way we do it in Kansas City. So we have to go back, re-engineer our roofing, redo how we frame the roof. Some people have to go to energy trusses. It's just a total change in the production style of the house. So in practice right now, we're seeing drastic cost increases for not only the change in the insulation, but also how we have to build that home. From what I've seen, we've modeled our own houses from what we were building from the 2009 Energy Code to the 2021 Energy Code, and we are seeing savings of energy of only $125 or less a year, and experiencing cost increases that are making customers have mortgage payments and PMI in upwards of $800 a year. So in my opinion, it never pays back.
So when the federal policies conflict with the state or local energy codes, what impact does that have on the supply of new homes?
Well, I think I spoke to it in my first testimony. In Kansas City, Missouri, you can see a drastic reduction in production, and that is some of people stalling to get things out.
Thank you. I have one more question I wanted to get to. What do you, in my area, we had wildfires come through and burn hundreds of homes last year, and now they want to rebuild, but now they're being told they can't hook up to natural gas. What would you tell homeowners like that when they have to rebuild?
When they can't hook up to natural gas?
Yep.
I would say it's unfortunate. I mean, in my area, I can't meet my energy codes without spending a bunch more money without putting a natural gas furnace in the house. That's how I meet the 21 Energy Code. So it's counterproductive to say that I can't use a gas furnace, yet I can build the house more efficiently and meet the code with a gas furnace.
Yep, you just can't afford to rebuild. Okay, I yield back.
Generally yields back. I now go to the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying, my questions are of Mr. Howard. A lot of talk here about production style, how you build a home. Tell me how you, talk a little about the energy efficient houses you build and the upgrades and the features you incorporate. I mean, I'm getting the impression from some of the others on the panel that production style and how you build it is impossible to do an energy efficient home. There's a big discrepancy here. Why are you able to do it, and what does it actually involve? Tell me.
As Chairman Duncan pointed out earlier, I mean, these are smaller homes to begin with, so that is reducing cost and, just the overall amount of materials that are required to build these homes. But I guess, if you want to think of it in terms of the secret sauce, to achieving 2021 IECC or Zero Energy Ready Home certification on a budget, I'm utilizing structural insulated panels as the wall and roof assembly of these homes. They're built in a small factory in Mocksville, North Carolina, by a company called Eco Panels, and they bring them out to our job site on a flatbed truck, and we actually assemble them with 2 to 3 laborers. It doesn't require, the level of skilled labor that's typically required in stick framing a home. So I'm able to put a house in the dry, as we say, in 2 to 3 days. In my market with traditional labor, that would take 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm able to shorten the turn time on these homes, which also means I'm shortening the carrying costs that's associated with the construction loans that I'm taking out in order to build these homes.
And what about this, and the federal incentives? You mentioned, I mean, I know there's not a federal mandate, it's, but what are the incentives that people take advantage of? You talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. The 45L tax credit that was renewed gives a builder the option of, if they certify a home to the Energy Star standards, it's a $2,500 tax credit per house. And if they certify to Zero Energy Ready Home, it's a $5,000 tax credit per house. So again, in my experience, that comes very close to offsetting the additional costs for me to achieve that.
You obviously don't find those that difficult to obtain, right? These federal incentives?
Not at all.
Okay. And now what about I mean, again, you're saying 6,000 to 7,000 per home. The others are talking 30,000 or above. Why is this big discrepancy between these numbers? I mean, I want to talk about the real world. Why are they talking numbers that are like, so much more?
Yeah, I've only recently seen some detail on how those estimates were created, and I feel like in some cases they're factoring in some costs that to me just don't make sense. But yeah, I mean certainly cost to build homes varies from market to market. But I could see if somebody who had never built to that standard might end up spending more money. But the longer I've done this, you start to figure out ways to be more efficient, to optimize systems, and certainly I've also made the choice to make some trade-offs in finishes to try to, I guess, put the money where I feel like it matters into the building envelope of the home, which is going to be very difficult for somebody to change later. You're going to remodel your kitchen or your bathroom probably in the next 10 to 15 years. Just as tastes change. But how often are you going to open the walls and change the amount of insulation in there? Not very often. So I'm trying to focus on those things that are difficult to change later.
I mean, Mike, I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, my experience with any kind of innovation or any kind of effort to make things more efficient is that, a lot of people just don't like to make change, right? And if you start to make the change, you look at it and you say, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. But then when you start doing it, you can do it for less and you can actually do it without a great deal of difficulty. And that seems to me exactly what you're saying. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll now go to Mr. Latta for 5 minutes.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for our witnesses for being with us today. And we all know that home ownership is one of those dreams that all Americans really want to have. And when I look at the state of Ohio, half the housing units in Ohio have been built before 1965, including the home that we live in. And more than two-thirds of the homes were built before 1980. Ohio's home sales are primarily from first-time buyers. 43% are purchasing in a small town. 95% of first-time buyers are financing their purchase. And when you look at the landscape across Ohio, I have serious concerns that these are far-reaching energy efficiency mandates could have unintended consequences for Ohioans trying to buy their first home. Mr. Woods, in your testimony, you highlight that compliance with the 2021 IECC can add significant costs to the price of a new home. Would you explain how these additional costs affect middle-class and first-time buyers?
Sure, thank you, Representative. Basically, for every $1,000 that we increase the price of a house, 106,000 households are priced out of the market. So when you take this into effect, that 77% of people can't even afford a medium-priced house today, yet we're talking about raising costs that much. We're pricing out a huge majority of the market. 2 million people won't be able to buy these homes if it costs $20,000 extra to build this house. So you're taking a huge chunk of the market out of home ownership by adding these codes on top.
Well, with the new HUD regulations, as you mentioned, will significantly increase the stringency of the codes for construction of homes backed by FHA and USDA. One of the things about this committee, we have a very broad jurisdiction, and I can ask, sometimes you have to ask these questions. When you look at the 2009 and the 2021 codes, just out of curiosity, your interaction with regulators, how many of the regulators have been in construction?
How many regulators are in construction?
Yeah.
I couldn't even begin to count. It's enormous how many people are regulating all aspects.
Well, no, I mean the regulators themselves had been in
Oh.
construction.
Very few.
Okay, because this is one of the questions I always have to get into, because again, when they start these regulations, and I've never heard anybody ever say this before us in this committee. I've never heard anybody say that they're against all regulations, but but I don't care what industry you're in, they all say the same thing: give us regulations we can live with. And especially when you look at these numbers that you've given us today, my concern is that how do they get their working knowledge to come up with what a code ought to look like from the 2009 to the 2021 and the changes out there? If just out of your opinion, if they've never been in construction to actually see it done.
I don't know if it becomes special interest groups influencing decisions or what, but they're definitely not one size fits all. And that's the unfortunate thing about the 21 Energy Code, is that what I need to do in Kansas City to make my house more energy efficient or better for the environment is much different than what somebody needs to do in California or Florida for that same house. So it's really hard to have a code that's written for the whole.
Right, so something that's being built in Northwest or Northern Ohio is different from what's going to be built in Southern California. Under the current law, with federally financed mortgages must comply with that 2009 IECC. It now requires, these homes to conform with the 2021 code. And again, getting into this again, given the conflict in the regulations, how are the builders supposed to comply with this when you have a conflict between the 2009 and the 2021?
You won't be able to. I mean, you won't be able to build a house for a customer. If I was building a spec home and a customer walked in and wanted to buy it, and I wasn't building it to the 21 Energy Code because the municipality didn't require it, I just can't sell that house to them. And unfortunately,
But like, again, if it's in Ohio, if the Ohio code says 2009, then what do you do? Who's the arbitrator on that?
there won't be, I mean, if it's a mandate from USDA, there will not be a loan that's able to be put on that house.
Oh, thank you very much. And just to follow up, not to be picking on you here, do you foresee a scenario where first-time home buyers may have difficulty securing a federally backed home loan or on an older home, such as a USDA rural development home loan?
Yes, I haven't seen how it applies to an older home, but I mean, if all USDA loans have to comply to the 21 Energy Code, then I'm not sure how they would buy a home that was built in the last year or two. They'd all be not able to have a USDA loan on them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, my time's expired and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I'll go to the gentleman from California, Mr. Peters, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the biggest problems facing California and San Diego is the cost of housing. I've said that I think that the cost of housing is probably the biggest barrier to the continued prosperity of San Diego and the Golden State. So I take very seriously the concerns that have been raised here. And most of these policies are formed at the state and local level, as people have put it out. And I have to say that California, and this is an issue back home, has done a really terrible job of allowing new housing to be built. We've put a lot of impediments there, and over 3 decades, I think we've really fallen behind, and that supply-demand thing is a big factor. So I don't want to suggest that that's federal policy, but that's a problem in my state. At the federal level, I did introduce the Build More Housing Near Transit Act with Chair Rogers, which is a great bipartisan effort to make sure that housing gets built near those projects that we spend federal taxpayers' money on for transit. We ought to incentivize that. If we're going to be spending a lot of money on a transit project, as a federal government, we ought to know what the local government's doing to make sure that people are going to ride it. And part of that is putting housing next to it and incentivizing that, making that part of the competition. So that's good for whether you're concerned about taxpayers getting fare box recovery out of that project, or whether you're concerned as an environmentalist about getting people out of their cars and reducing greenhouse gases. That makes good sense. But again, most of what happens on housing is state and local. Mr. Howard, I recognize because of the modernized standards, homeowners will save money on the back end through efficiency gains and reduce spending on heating, cooling, and water. I want to ensure that we're not increasing barriers to homeownership by passing along costs to lower-income residents who may not be able to afford that bigger upfront investment. There's billions of dollars in the infrastructure bill and in the Inflation Reduction Act for states and localities to implement these codes, as well as the 45L tax credit. However, the grant dollars don't go toward construction or reducing the cost of these more efficient materials, and the tax credit is not enough. How do you think we can reduce the upfront costs of compliance with these updated codes and make sure that these more efficient homes are affordable for all of our constituents?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think ultimately is, more stringent codes are adopted, the industry adapts. It takes some time. It takes, we're talking about obviously a large, sophisticated industry. It's like turning a battleship. So, but I think we underestimate ourselves in terms of the amount of innovation that we've seen in construction over the last few years. I think off-site construction technologies in particular have the ability to expedite construction by building components in a controlled environment as opposed to out in the weather like most of us do, and also to try to reduce some of that cost burden. So whether we're talking about panelized construction as I'm doing today or full volumetric modular construction, I think that's one of the answers to your question.
Another issue that's not directly related to what we're talking about today is what's happening in the insurance markets and being able to get insurance so that you can get a mortgage. Building codes play a part in that too in terms of resiliency. And in California, we've lost a lot of homes to wildfires. In San Diego County, we have too. And I think at another time, we probably want to talk about what's the role of building codes and making sure that we're providing assurance to the markets that they can invest in this home as someone who's lending money. Again, something I think has short-term costs, but long-term benefits. And finally, I just want to say again about the nature of this hearing. This already has happened. Again, these are rules we're talking about that were issued, final rules, in April of this year. Yet this is the committee that has jurisdiction over building law in this area. And not only did we not do something legislative here, we waited until the rules were final. We're not even taking this issue up while there was a notice of proposed rulemaking, presumably a year or two ago. So I'm sorry to the witnesses that this is a little bit of an academic exercise. We're kind of late to the game here, and we're actually not doing our job, which is to actually take the testimony from folks like you and come up with the rule ourselves. Because a bipartisan rule is going to be better, and it's going to be more durable. What's going to happen now is, assuming if there's a change in administration, there will be someday, whether it's this year or in 4 years, you have the potential that the regulations get repealed. I'm sorry about that. I think we should do better. I think this committee should be taking these issues up from a legislative perspective and dealing with them like it does our job to do, not waiting till let the administration do it and then waiting until it's over. And I apologize for that. And I yield back.
Chairman yields back. I now go to Mr. Griffith, 5 minutes.
Fwap! Fwap! With a 5-story glass atrium that illuminates lush groves of green bamboo inside the Thurgood Marshall Federal Judiciary Building across the street from Union Station is beautiful. It's also a death trap. This according to a Washingtonian article published on May 10th, 2024. And the reason is that they have a glass atrium and the birds fly into it because they can't see that it's a glass atrium. Here we are discussing federal buildings and private buildings in the building code, and we're not even talking about, and the federal government hasn't even talked about, the number of birds that die every year because they collide with glass structures and glass buildings. Now, you want to do something for the environment? Do you make people spend billions of dollars to get a little bit of a change maybe on the climate increase, the temperature increase? Or do you save birds? And people are going to say, well, it's just a few birds. In fact, the Thurgood Marshall Building, they estimate they pick up about 500 birds a year. The problem is, estimates show that a very small percentage actually are found at the end of a building. The data shows us that birds that hit the building often fly off. They have a head injury, they have a beak injury, they have internal bleeding, and they die later. According to a January 14th, 2023 American Bird Conservancy article that cites the Smithsonian, the estimates are between 365 million birds and 1 billion birds annually die because of bird strikes on buildings. And the reason I get frustrated about this is because we're talking here today about federal regulations that want to essentially ban de facto natural gas in federal buildings. And I'm just going to talk about the federal side of this. I know there's a private side too, but on the federal side, we could pass the Bird Safe Building Act. Instead, we pass this, it's going to cost billions of dollars and do very little. If we pass the Bird Safe Building Act, which has been introduced for a number of years now, but Mr. Quigley and I, we trade. When the Democrats are in control, he introduces it, and I'm his chief co-sponsor. When the Republicans are in control, I introduce it. And the cost of putting protection in is minimal. When you are building, and keep in mind that this gas requirement under Section 433 of the Energy Security and Independence Act of 2007 that mandates a 90% reduction in fossil fuels consumption in new and renovated buildings, the Bird Safe Building Act applies to federal new and renovated buildings. And if you're putting the building together or you're renovating it and you put a film on the glass anyway, the cost is either zero or very, very small to add in ultraviolet fibers. Those fibers allow the birds to see the glass. But instead, my colleagues on the other side and others, and there's people on both sides of this issue, but they want to talk about spending billions of dollars to save energy and ignore something we could actually do today that within 10 years would save hundreds of millions of animal lives. I don't know why we're not doing it. To me, it's a green issue that's also a conservative issue because it doesn't cost much money. And then when we show that the federal government can do it fairly cheaply, builders are going to say, hey, this is an option when I'm building your new house. Here's an option we can show you, and the federal government has already shown us we can do it for next to no money while we're building your house. After it's built, if you're applying the film on the glass at that time, would it be practical? I say all of that because it does concern me, because these regulations are going to drive up the cost for the federal government. These regulations related to the fuel consumption, as several of you have mentioned, Mr. Bonnell and Mr. Woods, would you agree that we could do more with this thing that doesn't cost anything than we're going to do with these energy requirements, and energy requirements that, I'm sorry, Mr. Howard, it may price my constituents out of the home buying market and they'll end up in mobile homes instead. Not as good an option. I'm sure you build fine houses, but that's an option for the consumer, and when we build it into the price, they can't afford it. Mr. Bonnell, would you agree with the general assessment I've just made?
I'm pro-birds, so that part, yes.
Well, and in all fairness, part of the reason I chose this opportunity, because it does touch on this issue, is that so many people, whether they're building a new building of 4 to 11 stories or whether they're building a new home, they don't even think about it. And for just making the decision to put the right film on your glass, you could save lives. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
For the record, I'm pro-bird too. Thanks for the levity
There
as
you go.
well. Now go to my friend from Texas, Ms. Fletcher, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for the record, I'm also pro-birds, and appreciate the testimony of all of our witnesses today. And I think, you know, it's interesting to me because I feel like we're all sort of talking past each other sometimes on some of these issues. Certainly, we have building codes for safety, and consumers like a lot of the energy efficiency that we have seen over the last several years, and consumers want affordable homes, and that's something that we in my district in Houston have always had a lot of. We've had a great supply of affordable housing. It has made Houston a destination for many people, and that's why we're so proud to welcome people from across the country and around the world who want to move to our community and become Houstonians. And we know that at the same time, we want to see those whether it's homes or commercial buildings, be energy efficient, because while we want homes that are affordable, we want homes that are insulated, certainly for us from the heat, but also from the winter storms. We really, we understand the importance of efficiency on a number of levels. And we also understand the incredible impact that some of these inefficiencies have on our larger infrastructure, like our grid. So we are concerned about all of these issues at the same time, and I think we can be concerned about all these and work together in a way where we can really find that middle ground to talk about how do we do things smarter, how do we make sure that we are reducing electricity consumption as our energy demands continue to grow, and helping Americans save. We have thousands of dollars a year in heating and cooling costs while keeping the price of building new homes affordable and retrofitting homes with new equipment. How can we keep that affordable? And certainly we've seen that in my district. We know that energy efficient buildings have been more resilient in some of our extreme weather events. We just had another one last week, but certainly prior to that with the winter storm a couple years ago, better insulated buildings protected the residents better. And we had some tragic circumstances in some of our less efficient homes. And so, as Mr. Peters said, we also know that state and local jurisdictions are primarily the ones who are drawing up these codes, and that the administration has been working on some voluntary codes with people across the country and encouraging states to adopt them to address all of these competing needs. Certainly, as I was saying, we've always had a lot of affordable housing in Houston, but that is changing. And in the most recent survey, our annual city survey, the Houston area survey, affordable housing is a concern for as many as 25%, 20 to 25% of our residents. So these are real concerns that Americans have in every community in the country. And I think that we should be working together to figure out how we achieve all of these goals. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. So I want to ask a couple questions of Mr. Howard in the time that we have. You have firsthand experience sort of seeing what those upfront costs to build in the energy efficiency into the homes have for buyers and how they're weighed against sort of the long-term projections. And I think many of us know that sometimes you can factor that in, but it isn't as present as just sort of that initial down payment and what's your monthly cost going to be in purchasing a home. And so one of the things that you mentioned was that there could be an opportunity to address that in the appraisal process as well, and that the appraisal process doesn't do a great job of considering the value of these energy efficiency investments. So do you feel, or do you think that some kind of rating system that can help rate a home and explain those potential cost savings both to buyers and to those who might be doing loans? I know that's been established in some other countries. Do you think that that would help buyers would help people make choices and perhaps help address some of the concerns about upfront costs?
Absolutely. We actually, through the home energy rating process that was developed by ResNet back in the 90s, we certainly have the ability today to certify and rate homes to give them sort of almost like a miles per gallon rating to be able to compare the relative efficiency of one home to another. So we definitely have that capability. If anything, I think it's grossly underutilized. But directly to your point about the appraisal process, the Appraisal Institute came up with an addendum 10 or 15 years ago now that gives appraisers the ability to recognize the additional value of energy efficiency features. And again, there's another resource that's been available to us for some time that is grossly underutilized. So some of it is just taking advantage of the tools that already exist.
All right, well, thank you so much. I went over my time, so I will yield back.
You're forgiven. Now go to the gentleman from Indiana, who Indiana's state bird, like the gentleman from Virginia, is the cardinal.
There you go.
So the man from the cardinal states recognized Mr. Bouchon for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think people might be aware the Department of Energy recently finalized efficiency standards that fail to take into consideration the design and factory construction techniques of manufactured homes, and would similarly drive up the cost for housing for working-class Americans. This is why I introduced in the committee, Republicans passed the Affordable Homes Act, which would rescind the provision of the 2007 Energy Independence Security Act that directs the Department of Energy to establish energy standards for manufactured homes. I just want to throw that out there. You know, we're talking about building homes, but the manufactured home industry is also substantial in the affordable space. And that will also be dramatically affected by some of these regulations. Look, I also want to just say, I'm an all-the-above energy person. Look, I think we can decrease our emissions and use all different types of energy sources. But the people I represent want a reliable energy and affordable energy. Those are, when you actually sit down and talk to people, those are critical. And, you know, most people are concerned about emissions, but when it butts up, when these standards butt up against the ability to have affordable, reliable sources of energy, reliability and affordability wins out. And I think, you know, I agree, we are talking past each other a lot on this. We all want to make progress, but, you know, if you look at what percentage of emissions and are related to your industry worldwide, I mean, it is essentially zero. And so are we really gonna do things that are gonna make it difficult for people that are lower income to afford an entry-level home? When we know that the effect actually on the global climate will be zero, essentially zero. I mean, if you look at this, you know, if you stopped essentially all U.S. carbon emissions right now, it would be I don't know what the number, 25% of worldwide emissions maybe. If you stopped every single carbon emission in the United States. So I think sometimes in these hearings, I find myself listening to these hearings, and I know the American people do too, and we're talking about issues that are important. We all want efficiency. We all want to not waste energy. We know that our grid is going to be having huge demands on our electrical grid particularly. I mean, just the proposals to go to all EVs, which I support, alone are estimated to increase the demand on energy 30 to 40% in the United States, roughly. And now, and so, you know, where's this energy going to come from? And you know, there's carbon capture techniques. American natural gas is the cleanest in the world. We have national security issues related to our LNG. I've been in Eastern Europe. Ask them where they would be right now without LNG imports from primarily the United States and Qatar and other like-minded. They cut themselves off from Russian natural gas almost overnight, particularly in Poland. So I just want to throw that out there. I mean, this is important, don't get me wrong. But in the overall scheme of things, are we really going to make it hard for people to buy a darn house? Really? Because the people I represent, let me tell you, you sit at the table with them, they want affordability. They want to be able to go to the grocery store and buy groceries. They want affordable gasoline for their cars, or if they want affordable energy for their home. And all of these things are important, but you know, I think we're wasting a lot of time arguing about things that have essentially no impact on the global climate, but have a dramatic impact on the people I represent. You know, the average income in my district is $55,000 a year. That's average. Think about that. And then the manufactured home industry is going to be damaged or devastated, and people can't buy manufactured homes. And that's sometimes what people can afford. So I appreciate all the testimony, and I appreciate your concern on all these things. But at the end of the day, Mr. Chairman, we need to do pragmatic, practical things to both keep affordable energy for this country, reliable energy for this country, and decrease our emissions. I yield back.
Jim yields back. I'll now go to the gentlelady from California, and this last time I'll do it. The California state bird is the California quail. Ms. Matsui, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, you're correct on that. We do like birds too. Anyway, first of all, I want to thank Phil Bonnell, who's president of PABCO, for coming before the committee to testify today. PABCO was founded in my hometown district of Sacramento in 1953, so welcome. California is the 5th biggest economy in the world, and there's reason why so many successful companies are there and flourish there. It's because we really bring together some of the most ambitious and visionary and innovative people in the world to tackle the most difficult problems facing this country. Today, that problem is climate change, and we must be clear-eyed about the challenge ahead. Buildings are responsible for 30% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, so increasing the efficiency of buildings can go a long way. Fortunately, energy efficiency is also one of the most cost-effective ways to fight climate change. Mr. Howard, I'm going to pick on you again. You previously worked for Habitat for Humanity, so you know how to build an affordable home. Is that correct?
I do.
Okay. I understand you also work for Mitsubishi Heating and Cooling, so you must think a lot about energy bills. Is that correct?
Yes.
On top of that, I also see that you were an instructor for the National Association of Home Builders. So you must be highly qualified to assess the home builder's estimates for what it comes to build a modern, efficient home. Are the home builder's cost estimates accurate?
Not in my experience. Again, yeah, the cost increases I'm seeing are in the $6,000 to $7,000 range, nowhere close to the 30,000 plus estimates that I've seen other places.
Okay. If you had to recommend to your fellow home builders how to reduce the cost of building an energy-efficient home, what advice would you give?
So, you know, I'll repeat the suggestion I made earlier, which is, you know, one of those is taking some of the construction off-site into a controlled environment where we can increase efficiency and optimize material resources. So whether that's panelized construction or full volumetric modular construction, I think that is one of the solutions we need to be looking at today and moving forward into the future.
Okay. You often hear that certain efficiency measures, like heat pumps, don't work for all climates. But analysis by the Pacific Northwest National Lab has shown that the average payback period for modern energy-efficient homes in North Carolina is less than 11 years across all climate zones. Mr. Howard, you live in western North Carolina, where winter temperatures can be bitter. How do energy efficiency measures perform in colder climates?
And again, speaking from personal experience, as a builder of all-electric homes and you know, someone who's living in one of those homes now, these are heated with what are considered cold climate heat pumps. So, you know, they're rated to operate at 100% capacity as low as -5 degrees. So, you know, as cold as it might get in Western North Carolina, we don't see those kind of temperatures for very long. So, yeah, I think the technology has certainly come a long way, and I think we're grossly underestimating it.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Howard, California building codes require that all new buildings be electric vehicle ready, meaning a home charger can easily be installed if the homeowner wants one. Mr. Howard, can you describe what that means in practical terms for a home builder to make a home EV ready?
Yeah, so for DOE Zero Energy Ready Home requirements, we're basically just leaving space in the electric panel to add a breaker for a future EV charger, and then typically running conduit from that panel to an exterior location. I think going an extra step to putting in a 240-volt outlet where you could plug in an EV would probably add somewhere to in the $500 to $600, you know, range per house if we wanted to go that extra step. I don't think it's necessary to actually add an EV charging station, which can be quite expensive.
So you can just go and do the wiring and conduit and leave it at that, and they'll just, if they want to do that, just an extra $500 more. Okay, thank you. So studies by DOE and RMI have found that retrofitting a house to install an EV charger can be several times more expensive than doing the wiring during the initial construction. So that's where, when you're building a house, if you would just do that at that point in time, it'd be great. So let me just say that many energy efficiency measures are much cheaper to install, and you've already said that before, during construction rather than doing to improve energy efficiency after the home is built. So the cost added if you didn't do that and you built a home without having that happen would be much more expensive, and I see that I must, my time, gone over my time. Thank you very much. I yield back. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Howard.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Howard, how many of these homes have you built, these smaller homes?
I'm working on an 11-unit community right now, and
How many have you built in total?
so in my past
How many are
experience with
complete?
Habitat for Humanity,
How many are complete? You said the size is about 1,000 square feet?
anywhere from 800 to 1,400 square feet, yes, sir.
Okay. So how many have you completed?
Yeah, if you include my Habitat experience, over 100 houses.
Okay. You realize that that size is about what it was during the Great Depression, so you want to get more people into smaller homes because of climate change? I mean,
So, yeah, I'm not suggesting that that size home is appropriate for every family, but these are intended to serve primarily 1- and 2-person households.
yeah, well, it sure comes across from some of the questions and responses that that's where you're heading with this, and maybe it's part of an agenda to reduce family size, I don't know, but I've got a couple other questions. Mr. Casper, every time I hear the Biden administration talk about a new policy that's going to save families money, I immediately suspect that prices are going up. And the elimination of natural gas, having worked in a couple of international engineering companies, having been involved in home building at different levels, I understand that natural gas is critical to home building, not just for appliances, but for kiln-dried lumber, kiln-dried brick. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I can. You know, our consumers are industrial, commercial. I'll just give an example of a manufacturer who was wanting to expand, wanting to make sure that he had reliable electricity, specifically in Illinois, to be able to continue to produce, and then plus natural gas, because he wanted to bring heat treating system into his manufacturing as well, or expand on it. And so it's critically important that not only from a fuel diversity, which I always say equals reliability, that is important not only for the production of these products from the housing industry, but any type of manufacturing across the board.
From an engineering perspective, and Mr. Bonnell, Mr. Woods, you either one of you can respond to this, but in terms of strength and reliability, and in terms of the quality of the building materials, do you prefer air-dried brick or wood compared to kiln-dried brick or wood?
So our company, as well as manufacturing drywall, sister subsidiary manufactures clay brick. Air-dried clay brick is not feasible from any sort of reasonable manufacturing schedule in terms of moving volume through. So what would happen would be a much diminished throughput, constraining the amount of product that's
So
made.
you diminish quality.
Likely diminished quality. Excuse me, I'm not a clay brick expert, but likely.
Yeah. Mr. Woods?
Yeah, we definitely, all of our lumber that we're using is kiln-dried lumber. I mean, we haven't
Even with kiln-dried lumber, you cull out quite a bit because some moisture remains, results in warping of the wood. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
It'd be very difficult for other wood products like plywood and particle board and things like that if it were not adequately dried. Wouldn't that be correct?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, that's the problem with some of the folks in the Biden administration. They've never, they're not familiar with building science, they're not familiar with engineering. They have science degrees. The bad news is it's political science. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now go to New York's Mr. Tonko for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reality is energy insecurity has been a long-standing issue faced by millions of Americans. In both 2015 and 2020, the Energy Information Administration found that more than a quarter of U.S. households reported difficulty paying energy bills or keeping their home at an unsafe temperature because of energy cost concerns. Millions of Americans forego food and medicine to pay their energy bills. So I appreciate my Republican colleagues' concerns about affordability. And I would encourage us to come together to support programs that benefit the most vulnerable Americans. Because I agree with Mr. Woods' testimony about the importance of retrofitting existing homes. Luckily, there are effective federal programs to support Americans struggling with home energy affordability, such as LIHEAP and the Weatherization Assistance Program. Buildings receive weatherization services and their owners save on average $372 every year, not to mention the benefits of living in a healthier and more comfortable home. So if we really want to address energy affordability, I hope we can give proper attention and support to the programs with proven track records to upgrade existing homes. And the reasons these major cost savings are possible is because these homes can be incredibly expensive to own, operate, and maintain, often because they were built at a time with no or weak minimum energy codes to ensure cost-effective operation. So, Mr. Howard, you discussed in your testimony that upfront home costs are just one of several factors that should be considered when determining home affordability. When you're building a home, how much do you consider how certain features will make homes more affordable to own and operate?
It's a huge focus for me personally, primarily because of my background with Habitat for Humanity. So again, the way I look at it is it's not just about the first cost. We have to make sure that the home is not only affordable to buy, but also affordable to own and operate. So, being very careful with our choices, in the building process, and making sure that, we're doing the very best that we can at the time we build the home to ensure that it remains an affordable place to live long-term.
And I assume you bring that to your customers' attention.
Absolutely.
And how do you decide which of these features to include in any home that you're building?
It's always a cost-benefit analysis. So, we're trying to find building technologies or building materials that are the most cost-effective, but also achieve, the greatest results.
Right. And Mr. Howard, you said you see energy codes as a minimum floor. Let's talk about how we can raise that floor for all American consumers. Recently, HUD and USDA announced that new homes financed by those agencies would need to meet stronger minimum energy codes, the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code. Mr. Howard, do you believe raising this floor from the 2009 code, which had previously been required, to the 2021 code will deliver significant savings?
Yes, absolutely.
And these agencies agree, finding that residents of single-family homes would save on average some $963 every year on energy costs. And this tracks with analysis by the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory of North Carolina's decision to move from the 2015 IECC code to the 2021 version. The lab's experts found households will save almost $400 annually on energy bills and will pay back the upfront cost increases within a matter of a few years. So over 30 years, this update will save, I'm informed, North Carolinians over $5.3 billion in energy costs. I think that's worth achieving. So with that, I thank you for your testimony, and I thank you, Mr. Chair, and yield back.
Jim yields back, and I'll go to Texas, Mr. Weber, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry I had to be late. I had meetings with other people, so I didn't get to hear a whole bunch of this, but I've got these, y'all's information in front of me. Is it Bonnell or Bonnell? Okay. Throughout this Congress, Republicans have been fighting for affordable, reliable, and dispatchable energy sources to remain as baseload power for our grid. Before I actually get into my question, I want to make a few comments. Y'all watched that under the current president, he came out with a transportation infrastructure bill to put 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations around the country, okay? We don't have the grid right now to support what we've got right now. So if I can be funny for a minute, I said I saw a survey last week that said 90% of all electric vehicles are still on the highway today. The other 10% made it home safely. Some of y'all will figure that out later. So you've been fighting, you know that Republicans, Mr. Bonnell, have been fighting for affordable, reliable, and dispatchable energy sources to remain as a baseload power for our grid. If we don't get our grid geared up or electrified or powered up, probably is a better term, we're going to be in a mech of a mess if we do build those 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. As you wrote in your testimony, the sun doesn't always shine. I try to tell my friends across the aisle the sun goes down at night. And the wind doesn't always blow, which means renewables are not always going to contribute to the grid. Your company's plant in Las Vegas has experienced, according to you, a 248% increase in the cost of gas and electricity. I owned an air conditioning company for 35 years. We watched subdivisions get built. We watched homes get calculated for the amount of energy they would need, whether it was going to be heat pumps, whether it was going to be electric heat, and you know this, electric heat is the highest cost of heating a home because it's a dead short between two lines of 120. Y'all know those electric heating homes. Mr. Woods, you probably know that too. I put in a lot of systems back in the day. So yours have a 248% increase in the cost of gas and electricity. Can you speak to how unreliable energy markets actually affect the market construction on new homes? Can you speak to that for a minute, Mr. Bonnell?
So I can speak to it from my perspective on my building materials. The average home consumes approximately 10,000 square feet of wallboard. The average cost increase, if we do not have a reliable grid, number one, but also reliable energy in the form of natural gas, the numbers that you're currently seeing, that 10,000 square feet of wallboard roughly would cost, depends on your market, I suppose, but maybe $1,000 to $2,000 for the home. If we did not have reliable energy, the question was posed to me, what about using electrical grid right now to dry our products? That number would be more like $4,000 to $5,000 or more. And you can take the same case for the asphalt roofing. It would more than double this. And I think one of the points that I would like to make is that though there will be more strain on the electrical grid if we follow some of these mandates, what are we going to do to replace the 46% of electricity that is currently generated by natural gas?
Well, that will be a problem. We will be looking at that. But as a builder, you're looking for cheaper materials. Are you looking outside? Are you forced to look outside the country for cheaper materials?
We are a U.S. manufacturer, and proudly so, and we want to stay that way. So I would say no, we will not source from the outside. We will find a way to make the products as best we can. But quite frankly, if we are not economically attractive, our products are largely commodity products.
Sure.
And they won't be bought.
I built a home for my beautiful bride in 1992, a 4,000 square foot home in Friendswood. I'm in Pearland, Texas. Put 3 air conditioning systems in it. I was the architect, basically, and we went from 2x4 walls to 2x6 walls. Instead of half-inch sheathing with foil back on the outside, I put 1-inch sheathing with foil on each side. Some of y'all remember the old cordless phones they came out with in the 90s. Says you could get away 900 feet outside the house from the base. Not in my house, you couldn't. It was wrapped in foil and aluminum. So people need to be able to do the things that are the best for their homes, and local codes mean something, local control means something, and for this administration or anybody else to want to say the government needs to tell you how to do things best is ludicrous. Anyway, I'm out of time, and I'm going to leave it there and yield back. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chairman yields back. We'll now go to Ms. Casper from Florida for 5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Building energy codes save money. They pay for themselves, they help lower electric bills. And I really regret that my GOP friends in this committee have wasted so much time this Congress on trying to scare people into believing that energy efficiency is bad, because the American people are a lot smarter than that. They like energy efficiency. It's popular. They like lower electric bills. They like energy efficient appliances and buildings. And when the Democrats drafted the Inflation Reduction Act, we recommended some new policies to help people save money and cut pollution at the same time, because buildings are the source of about 40% of climate pollution in our country. So we did a few things to cut cost and cut pollution. One was these new incentives for states and local communities to update building energy codes. The other was tax incentives. And if you don't know about these, you might want to write them down, because they are real money back into your pockets. Under 25C tax credit, that's the energy efficiency home improvement tax credit, up to $2,000 per year, each calendar year, for renovations or an existing home for a new heat pump or air conditioner. And that tax credit is available through 2032. Then the 179D tax credit, that's the energy efficiency tax credit for commercial buildings. That's a deduction based on square footage to make it easier for owners to qualify for larger tax deductions for HVAC systems and facades, walls, lighting, upgrades. 45L was expanded. That's the energy efficient home tax credit. It helps builders, developers, and contractors with new construction and renovation. That's up to $5,000 per year. And then additional cost savings through rebates, through weatherization of homes. And then one here that's at issue is helping local communities and states update cost-saving building codes. And just so it's on the record, when local communities and states do this, it's voluntary. So any implication that this is a federal mandate is completely wrong. But what's also been missing from this discussion is also the rising costs of the climate crisis. The climate changes we're experiencing right now are dangerous. They are intensifying. They're driving up the cost of property insurance. They're driving up the cost of flood insurance and electric bills. And these are real considerations when you're trying to afford the purchase of a home. So if the committee wanted a serious hearing on the rising cost of home buying in America, we'd be talking about skyrocketing property insurance, especially in Florida. I just pulled up this news article. Home insurance rates are expected on average to increase 6% in 2024, could jump as high as 23% in states with severe weather. That's making 30% of Americans very nervous. In Florida, we're already paying more than 4 times the national average for home insurance. And early forecasts are for a hyperactive 2024 Atlantic hurricane season that could bring more rate increases into 2025. And what is driving that is the burning of fossil fuels. So we've just got to be a whole lot smarter here and not focus on some shiny object that you think energy efficiency is driving up costs. It's a whole much larger picture. And I'm not even going to get into the health cost or the cost of all of these natural disasters on the bottom line of the federal budget. We just need to keep working to lower pollution and lower energy costs for families and tackling the climate crisis. So, but I do want to end on an optimistic note. It's not all doom and gloom. We have a lot of the solutions. Mr. Howard, what innovations in home building are exciting to you? What have you seen in just the past few years that give you hope? What do you see on the horizon to help make families, their homes more resilient and more efficient?
Yeah, I guess, as you heard, I spent a few years in the HVAC industry working for Mitsubishi Electric, and that's just one example of a manufacturer that's come a long way on cold climate heat pump technology.
It's kind of a funny word, heat pump.
because in Florida, we say air conditioner and heat pump, it's not a great connotation, but these are cooling units.
Absolutely, yeah, you're getting heating and cooling, and, you know, the beauty of, or the magic, I guess, of a heat pump is that you're not making heat, you're just moving it from one place to another. So in Florida, we're gonna take it out of your house and dump it outside. Yeah, so I think heat pump, you know, technology, as you heard me say in my testimony, both in terms of the space conditioning, water heating, a heat pump dryer that doesn't require a vent to the outside. It's a condensing dryer. So, yeah, I think, in my opinion, those are some of the great strides we've made in construction technology to help us continue to reduce our energy bills.
Thank you very much. Yield back.
General Lady's time's expired. I'll now go to the Crossroads of America, Indiana's Mr. Pence.
Where we're having the Indy 500, Mr. Chairman, this weekend. Thanks for holding this committee hearing, and Ranking Member DeGette for holding this, and all of you all for being here. I'm not going to explain to you theoretical stuff. I spent my entire career in distributing petroleum product or getting energy where it needed to be, when it needed to be, and the quantities it needed to be. And so my approach on this committee back home has been to put together a round table and talk to people about the implementation of the mandates that come out of the administration. I've gotten the state of Indiana, utilities, distributors, research in universities, Purdue, Vincennes, parking, mobility experts, charging station developers, and had them all come together. And I recently heard from energy companies, energy transmitters, and housing developers that say that if one or two more homes in their developments install EV charging stations, they will need new transformers to power the neighborhood. Now, I bring that up. That's kind of a simple, you've probably already talked about the transformer issue out there. But all I hear about is we can't get the energy there into the neighborhoods where it needs to be, whether I'm talking to MISO in my area or people that need to buy the transformers. And here's a new one I want to ask each one of you about, if you heard this one. Insurance companies are dropping homeowners insurance where they're putting EV chargers in the homes. Mr. Bonnell, have you heard that one?
I've not heard of that, but in the state of California, you're lucky if you're keeping your home insurance right now.
Why is that? Tell me that.
Well, I think the insurance companies are moving out in force, is what's happened. They are pulling their willingness to insure. I know this personally.
For other reasons? You know this personally?
I know this personally. We just lost insurance coverage on our house in Thousand Oaks, California, and we're forced to go into a tertiary third-party market and absorb a 50% price increase just to have it. So to answer your question, I think what most people point to is the severe wildfire issues.
Which have a lot to do with the power lines and the inadequate transmission, correct?
Absolutely true. It also has to do with a state who, I think with right intentions, tried to limit insurance companies' ability to charge. And instead of being able to raise rates to meet the risk, they're simply just not insuring.
Well, then we should have more mandates. That obviously helps. How about Mr. Woods? Have you heard about the insurance debacle?
I have heard of people losing their home insurance due to fires caused by EV chargers inside their homes, yes.
Any sense of what type of charging stations?
I don't know.
I even heard, and I think it was one of my peers told me about their neighbor put in a charging station, and their charging station, their house, heated up in their carriage house. There was an effect, which probably a transformer issue, right? So these building mandates that you have to put certain things in, even water, the more they're going to demand electricity, the more problems we're going to have. Where have you heard that that's a fact? They've dropped insurance?
I have heard of, yes, I've heard of fires in houses where people have lost their insurance because of it, and it is because of an EV charger inside the home.
Mr. Howard?
No, to be honest, I've not heard that. I mean, I've been driving electric vehicles for almost 10 years, and I've had home charging stations for that entire time, and it's never been an issue for my insurance company.
Good. Mr. Casper?
Yeah, I have not heard that, but we are electric distribution cooperative as well as natural gas, and we are seeing the strains on the grid system, specifically the distribution system. You think about, you have one transformer you mentioned that might supply 5 different homes in a particular community, and then you might have another one down on the next pole that's serving. So if let's everybody put 5 EVs, and then there, again, you'd have to have an
Yeah,
additional
I had a local utility said if somebody else puts another EV in this neighborhood, everybody's power's going down.
Yeah.
And of course, I know of these big boxes where they're putting them on the interstate and where there's not enough energy coming to that location to actually do. So these mandates for building codes make no sense because we don't have the ability to get the energy there. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Dr. Schreier is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to take a moment to just get into the nitty-gritty of the cost-benefit analysis, and I wanted to enter into the record a study published by the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, PNNL, on the cost-effectiveness of the residential provisions in the 2021 IECC, or International Energy Conservation Code standards. That'd be all right to enter that into the record? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, with every release of the International Energy Conservation Code, the IECC, Department of Energy commissions PNNL to conduct this robust analysis on the cost effectiveness for both commercial buildings and residential homes and how it compares to the previous standard. And importantly, this particular study in 2021 took a fuel neutral approach. So it looked at natural gas, looked at fuel oil, electricity, including heat pumps in that electricity, heating, cooling, as all possible sources for different ways of heating and cooling. The study concluded that homeowners over a 30-year period in every domestic climate region will see a net cost benefit. And that's factoring in construction costs, new building materials, interest rates, and more. I will also say, because I know that different areas are different, but that these savings were returned on average within 10.5 years. So that means that over a typical 30-year mortgage, homeowners make back those savings and then continue to enjoy those savings for the next 20 years when, without a doubt, energy costs will be much more expensive. So we've had a PNNL study like this one for every new IECC standard since in 2006 when they started doing these evaluations and these standards, and every one of these studies by PNNL has shown the same trend, lowered costs overall for the homeowner. Mr. Howard, you've already answered my first question about what you've been seeing on the ground. And so I thought I would just follow up on that question because you're talking about a $6,000 or $7,000 increase, and then we're hearing from the National Association of Home Builders about a $30,000 increase. And I was wondering if you could just talk about why there is this big difference.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from personal experience, but it is hard to fathom how there could be that large a gap, between those estimates. I mean, certainly, as we've talked about already, depending on where you're building in the country, costs are going to vary. But yeah, I don't see how there could be that great a discrepancy, which certainly causes you to question the numbers.
Now, I'm also curious because you build homes for Habitat for Humanity. I'm sure that you have to think about what is the most impactful change that you could make to get the biggest bang for your buck. And I was just wondering if you could tell me, kind of a couple thoughts, not necessarily in perfect order, but as homeowners are thinking about it, they're building a new home, what should they do, top to bottom? What are the most impactful things in order?
Yeah, sure. Same way I would, talk to my building science students at App State. We're primarily focusing on the building envelope and trying to make improvements to that because, as I mentioned earlier, those are difficult changes to make for a homeowner down the line. So increasing levels of insulation where that makes cost-effective sense, as well as air sealing details, better windows, better doors, all those things impact the overall ability of that home to preserve heat in the wintertime or reject heat in the summertime.
Thank you. Those are all changes we have improved in our own home. The next change we're going to make is probably changing our gas stove to an induction stove. And so we did a little looking there and really did not find that the induction stove was much more expensive. So I think that'll be a great payoff, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where electricity prices are notoriously lower than the rest of the country. So I want to thank you for what you're doing and for taking that conservation into account when you're building these homes and looking out for people's health and for their pocketbooks. Thank you. I yield back.
Generally yields back. I now go to Mr. Allen from Georgia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Duncan, for holding this important hearing. And I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. I come from the construction business. You know, building concrete's doubled in cost in the last 3 years. That wasn't caused by building codes. That was caused by terrible energy policy. It costs twice as much to develop neighborhoods today. Guess what? We can't develop neighborhoods because we can't get transformers because of this new rule on transformers. So I think what we're talking about here today, I mean, they're talking about some savings down the road. I'm telling you, the American people are priced out of just about everything today, whether it be groceries, I don't care what it is. And when you put out rules to substantially reduce a major portion of our economy, and it drives up prices, people are going to suffer. And what I want the American people to understand is where this is coming from. The reason we're holding this hearing today is because there's several rules that are driving certain HVAC principles, you know, the gas, the heat pumps. I'm going to tell you, a gas heat comes on, it'll heat your house. That gas heat will run about 5 minutes. That heat pump's going to run for hours to heat the same house. And you got one motor running, burning 120 volts. And yet, we have no idea where we're going to get the electricity to do all these things that this administration is talking about. They have no idea what the future holds. I'll tell you who does have the idea is the people sitting here. The people in the business, the free market out there understands the repercussions of these policies. And we're all sick of it. Mr. Woods, can you talk about some of the issues in the 2021 IECC, particularly with the International Code Council process? This 2021 code more expensive than previous energy code editions. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah,
What it's doing to you?
Yes, I mean, I think we've heard today from both sides that the 21 Energy Code is more expensive to build, no matter how you shake it. From $8,000 to $30,000, it's more expensive to build, which in my opinion is unfortunate when everybody has agreed too that affordability of homes is the issue.
Yeah.
So why, if affordability of the homes is the issue, are we talking about raising prices at all? We should be trying to figure out how to reduce the price of the house so that people can get into it. My customers have had for years options to upgrade the energy efficiency of their home. And I can't tell you how many we've sold, but it's 1 or 2 in 200 homes is what we sell. So
Right.
1 to 2% buy energy upgrades. They choose other upgrades.
The upfront costs associated with complying with it, how long does it typically take for homeowners to see a return? Like they're talking about these down-the-road savings. You know, will anybody ever benefit from that? I mean, how long you got to live?
Well, I think that's the thing. I mean, we're talking about energy savings that are, I think it was said 10 years. It's been said 20 years. Most people live in their house 7 years, so they're never going to get it back. In my opinion, it never pays back.
Yeah.
Because in my home that I had the energy code ran on, it was $125 a year savings, but it cost $860 more for the mortgage a year.
Right.
That never pays back.
Yeah, yeah. Mr. Bonnell, you mentioned since 2010, green energy policies have been a significant driver of energy cost, and this is in turn impacts construction costs. How do you know, like there's a lot of volatility in pricing today. How are you dealing with that?
The two methods we really have available to us are looking at buying futures gas strips, which cost typically much more than the daily spot market, but you're protecting against future volatility and spikes. So that has a raising of the baseline effect. The other method, quite frankly, that we've used is curtailing production. And in a commodity business, when less product is available in the marketplace, prices go up. It's pretty simple.
Well, it's obvious that the EPA and their requirements, like the gas stove, I had, never in my wildest imagination, I think I would stand on the House floor and defend my wife's gas stove, and we won. We won that battle, and we will win other battles, and because this nonsense has got to come to an end. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Chairman yields back. Mr. Cardenas, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing, and also to Ranking Member to get gas stoves. Prior to coming to Congress, I was fortunate enough to serve my community as a Los Angeles City Councilman for nearly 10 years. During my tenure, I sat on the Housing Community and Development Committee, which oversaw housing. Having significant experiences dealing with building codes, I was concerned by my Republican colleagues' March 27th letter to Secretary Granholm, which seems to suggest that the Department of Energy's building code grant programs are mandates. Either Republicans have completely misunderstood how building codes work, or they are pushing forward a blatant misinformation. Let me be clear, the Department of Energy does not mandate new minimum building energy codes for communities. States voluntarily adopt them. Luckily for the states and localities that would like to do so, congressional Democrats and the Biden administration have worked to deliver support. The bipartisan infrastructure law provided $225 million to help states, tribes, and local entities implement updated building energy codes. Similarly, the Inflation Reduction Act established the Assistance for Latest and Zero Building Energy Code Adoption Programs, which provides $1 billion for states and local governments to adopt and implement the latest building energy codes. Mr. Howard, can you speak to how choice is embedded into these grant programs and how, once awarded, these programs support the localized needs of communities?
Yeah, again, I can speak to my experience in North Carolina. So I think it's important to point out that there's both a prescriptive path and a performance path to code. And I think most builders, including myself, have historically utilized only the prescriptive path. But what I've found through building homes to the Zero Energy Ready Home Standard and working with my home energy rater, HERS rater, is that we can actually utilize the performance path and often find savings that way. So in essence, build the home for less money because we're using a performance path, and we can sort of fine-tune or tailor that path to make sure that it's a more cost-effective house at the end of the process.
Isn't it a business practice in almost every industry to look at initial cost and long-term stranded costs, and then look at cost expenditures and savings on the front end, but also extrapolate out whether it's cost beneficial to save money throughout time?
Of course, we want to make sure that, we're making good decisions, based on trying to keep the home affordable to buy on the front end, but also making sure it's affordable.
So actually saving on ongoing monthly costs for 3, 5, 10, 20 years or longer can actually replenish whatever the upfront cost may have been in some cases.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So to be clear, this is a one-size-fits-all approach, or do states and local entities have the flexibility to adopt codes that best suits their needs?
Yes.
Yes, as in, is it a one-size-fits-all, or is there flexibility where local users can benefit by using flexibility?
There's a lot of flexibility in the code. So can I give an example?
Please do.
So one of the examples that Mr. Woods gave earlier was the requirement in certain climate zones to go from what might have been R38 or R49 to R60 in the attic. And
You're
certainly.
talking about insulation?
Yes, sir. Yeah, so if you're building stick building a roof and trying to put R60 in that, that's going to be very difficult, to his point. But there are essentially options in the code that allows you to back that down to either R49 or even R38 in some cases. So as you stated, there's certainly some flexibility in there, and it doesn't even require some special exemption. It's literally written into the code.
Oh, so it's actually literally written in the code. Okay, thank you very, very much. Can you speak about how the DOE grant programs established in the BIL and the IRA will help improve efficiency and, as a result, better ensure long-term affordability?
Again, I'll speak from my own experience with the 45L tax credit. I mean, I was planning, I was already building to the Zero Energy Ready Home standard before 45L was renewed, but certainly it's nice to have the tax credit to offset some of those additional costs to achieve that level of performance.
Okay, so there are benefits upfront and long-term especially.
Absolutely.
Okay, my time having expired, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Now I'll go to Mr. Balderson from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate y'all being here today. And my first question will be for Mr. Bonnell and Mr. Casper. Just last week, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation released their 2024 Summer Reliability Assessment that shows significant risk for supply shortfalls and power outages across the country. The EPA's Clean Power Plan 2.0 will shut down existing reliable power generation and prevent new natural gas-fired power plants from being built. And at the same time, we are seeing record increases in demand on the electric grid. Mr. Casper, you mentioned concerns with the impact the Department of Energy's rule will have on VA facilities and military bases. And Mr. Bonnell, you raised concerns about the strained electric grid and increasing demand from AI and data centers. As I was coming through the door to ask my question, I heard Congressman Weber brought up something on grid reliability, and I would like to follow up on that and this rush, the consequences of this rush to electrification. Mr. Casper, Mr. Bonnell, can you expand on the concerns you've listed with the department's rule on grid reliability, and why is a reliable grid essential to your businesses and customers you serve? Mr. Casper, you may answer first.
I can start.
Thank you.
I mentioned earlier about a particular member consumer of ours in the electric as well as the natural gas who was concerned about the reliability in the Mid-Continental Independent System operating area. And the bigger picture of this is that direct use of natural gas, it's 90% or more efficient. When you're talking about generating additional electricity, it's going to be requiring more additional natural gas to develop or be able to produce the amount of electricity that's going to be needed for this electrification that we're talking about today, whether it's homes, businesses, or commercial operations. So when you're looking maybe 66% efficient at the top in converting that natural gas to electricity. In most cases, just on a simpler cycle, it's probably more like 35 to 40% efficient. So you're talking 3 times more efficiency through a direct use of natural gas.
Would you like to follow up?
Yes, we're talking about a lot of things here today about improving efficiencies of homes, which I think everybody probably in this room can agree that's a valuable exercise. What we should be talking about is where we're at today. And where we're at today in the western half of the United States, at least, is we're in a very strained energy position. I mentioned at the top of my testimony that in the last 10 years, we retired 5,000 megawatts of coal production in the West. That has been supplanted with natural gas-fired generation of electricity. We have strived to make renewables a big portion of our portfolio. In California, I believe it's around 12 or 13%, maybe a little bit higher, but they have a big problem in their interruptible nature. And what that means to our business is, quite frankly, is a very volatile cost situation. And I used references to 3 times in the last 4 years that we've seen incredible pricing on natural gas, which we use to make our products. At one point in 2023, the highest natural gas price on the planet, not higher than Europe, higher than the things that they were experiencing over there during the Ukraine war, the highest on the planet that impacted Southern California and Las Vegas. Those things make our products much more costly and just simply adds to the cost of building a home.
Thank you. Mr. Casper, I'll go back to you again. I want to be conscious of our time here. I want to discuss the cost savings and affordability associated with natural gas. Mr. Bonnell kind of touched on it a little bit. You mentioned that homeowners who have chosen to use natural gas appliances for heating and cooking can save an average of $1,000 per year on their energy bills compared to homeowners who use electric appliances. If the government takes away the option for natural gas and propane home hookups, how will our rural constituents be impacted, and will it raise cost or lower cost? You have 20 seconds, please. Thank you.
No problem. We actually have an energy detective that we use. We evaluate this for our member consumers, whether electric, natural gas, what's best for them. But again, going back to fuel diversity equaling reliability, and it's really a consumer choice of who and what they want, or what that individual wants, whether it's the elderly or the low income. When I say elderly, I didn't mean that from that perspective, but from a fixed income.
My 84-year-old mother.
Gentlemen, time's expired, and now go to Mr. Vesey for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know that it's been talked about already here before, but with the United States using so much of our electricity use towards building operations, and it being a big part of the greenhouse gas emissions that we see in this country. And then when you think about all of the new devices that we're about to add onto the grid, when you think about the data centers and all of that energy that is going to be plugged in, we can see that our electricity pie is only going to grow. It's not going to get smaller anytime soon. And in a fast state that I live in, like Texas, that is literally just like growing like right before your eyes. It's amazing. We have new little subdivisions and new towns popping up literally all the time. I do not exaggerate. And I know that our grid operator anticipates, and ERCOT anticipates, about 152 gigawatt of new load by 2030. That's a lot. That is a lot. And so we're here today debating building energy codes that could provide Americans with about $182 billion in energy savings and avoid about 840 million metric tons of carbon pollution by 2040, which is also a lot. I know that these codes are voluntary, and states can choose to adopt these model codes and can also decide whether their cities have the authority to adopt their own codes. And so I'm trying to figure out why we shouldn't be tackling this problem from both sides. And I want to ask Mr. Woods, on this topic of voluntary adoption, you say in your testimony that it is designed to serve as a model for state and local governments who can choose to adopt or amend the various provisions based on their localized communities. But then you go on to discuss the negative consequences of implementing a national energy code with no consideration for local conditions. And you conclude this passage with, at a minimum, federal policies and programs must provide sufficient flexibility and incentives. Isn't that exactly what the DOE is doing with IECC, or am I missing something here?
No, I respectfully say they're not. I mean, they have given grant funds to people to adopt the code unamended. Every code in my area has been amended for as long as I can remember, until the 21 Energy Code was adopted unamended because they received grant money, and the hook was you have to adopt it unamended. That makes it to where they're not making choices, they're adopting the full code.
I also wanted to ask, I know that about the cost estimates in your testimony. I think that you said that the compliance can add to about $31,000 per home, but the American Council for an Energy Efficiency Economy says that claim is based on old speculation by home builders in one city about a proposed local update code. So who is right again? Is that true? Is it based on an old assumption there about one home builder?
Well, I think that, like we've said before, there's many different ways to build houses in the parts of the country. The $31,000, I believe, came out of Kansas City, and I know it to be a true number. I'm a builder in Kansas City that builds a much smaller house. My number is not $31,000. It's $13,000 to $18,000 per house is what it cost me. But as I said earlier, we've run projections on what the cost savings is for a homeowner on that same house by coming up to the 21 Energy Code. It never pays them back. The extra money they're going to pay on a mortgage is more than they're going to save in energy. They're already strained to buy the house. So it doesn't matter what the energy costs are at the back end for them if they can't get into the house to begin with.
Okay. I'd also like to ask some of the other panelists to give some voluntary input on this. I know that DOE's response to the majority letter, it states that the DOE also does not mandate new minimum building codes for communities, and that rather these funds assist states and units of local government with the authority to update building codes that voluntarily choose to update their standards. I wanted to ask, in the brief time that's there, how do you all respond to that, especially those that are opposed to DOE's actions and the IECC? We can just go from the left and we'll skip over Mr. Woods and make our way, please.
Congressman, building codes are not my field of expertise. I'm a very rare breed. I'm a manufacturer, so it'd be difficult for me to answer those. But I do think the issue at hand that we're all dancing around is affordability.
Yeah.
And we know that homes are not affordable now. And what we're doing on energy policy as well as what we're doing in code is helping to drive that price up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman yields back. We have one more congressman, Mr. Pfluger from Texas. After that, regardless of any members that come in, I'm going to adjourn the committee due to House floor votes. So Mr. Pfluger's last, and then we'll adjourn, but Mr. Pfluger, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the witnesses, Mr. Casper, I think we'll have a 5-minute conversation here.
We could.
And just spend my time talking with you, because what I'm worried about, this is kind of a general theme that we've seen in the last 3+ years of this administration. You've got these mandates and you have these things that are happening, but yet I'm kind of thinking about the science here and the math and all the ways that that's going to happen, whether it's an EV mandate or whether it's a ban on certain appliances or whether it's building codes in localities and municipalities that say you can't have natural gas hookups. And I'm just trying to figure out in my head where the electricity is going to come from and where the power is going to come from. So what I want to start with is in the coming 10, 15, 20 years, maybe describe to us what you see and how you see natural gas, the role that it's going to play throughout our country demand-wise, and maybe give us a prediction of what demand for electricity looks like in the next 10 to 15 years in this country.
I think that's a great question. So just got back from a gas supply conference, and we talked about these, especially with AI and data centers, for example. So potentially another 1.3 Chicagos being added, and by 2030. Then beyond that, it could be 4 additional Chicagos for the electric load. So yes, where is this electric power going to come from? We're struggling just in the Midwest to build a natural gas fired facility. And so I remember traveling in Texas in the early 2000s. You guys were building them left and right because you have natural gas, sufficient quantities of natural gas, which is pumped or distributed all the way up to our locations in the Midwest. And we utilize that natural gas for direct use of for our members, whether that's manufacturing, commercial, or residential.
Is electricity demand going to increase in the U.S. in the next 10 to 15 years? And if so, what are the estimates you're hearing, just anecdotally?
Like I said, just data centers alone, potentially four additional Chicago loads. You know, one of our largest cities in the
And
nation.
what part of how much of the pie will be serviced by natural gas? Worldwide, are fossil fuels going away?
So no, they are not. 40% of our natural gas currently that's being utilized here in the U.S. is being used for electric generation. I know Phil had mentioned up to 46% of electricity. On average, I think it's 43% across the nation. Last year in 2023, that was utilized natural gas to produce electricity. Now, again, from an efficiency standpoint, and I mentioned this earlier, we're looking at maybe 40% efficient in converting that natural gas to electricity. And where direct use of natural gas, you can get 90% plus efficiency from that same unit of natural gas.
Wow. When you think about the localities, municipalities, I mean, are you seeing this nationwide where they're banning natural gas in one form or another? And then if so, what's the impact on consumers and what's the impact on those local economies and our larger American economy?
Yeah. Just from our smaller communities in Northwest Illinois, again, it's about reliability. You got to have, and consumer choice more than anything. When we sit down with our member consumers and we talk to them, we show them the energy assessments, we go over them with them. We're a not-for-profit cooperative. We're not out to make a bunch of money off of one or the other. We want what's best for our member consumers, and it's their choice. And I mentioned earlier, with fixed income folks, they'll look at it and they'll go, I don't necessarily can afford this heat pump, for example. I'd rather have, I'm probably going to be in this house for another 6 years. I'm not going to look 30 years out, for example.
When you look at the policies that are in place, where will this put us? If we go down this road of banning natural gas hookups and appliances, mandating EVs, doing the things that have been done the last 3.5 years, where will that put us in our competition with other countries, China, Russia? What's the net effect?
Well, for example, of course, China being one of our biggest competitors, they're building all types of generation facilities across the nation. We're only building renewables right now, and that's going to come back and bite us from a reliability standpoint more than anything, and that is going to harm our economy in the future. There's some transition in the future, but it's 20, 30, 40 years out.
Thank you to the other witnesses. Thank you for being here. And with that, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today. Members may have additional questions, which they'll submit in writing, and they have 10 business days to do that. We ask you to submit answers within 10 business days, and I ask that witnesses do their best to do that upon receipt of the questions. Ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the documents included on the staff hearing documents list. Without objection, that'll be the order, and without objection, subcommittee will stand adjourned.